A student's heart stopped in the hallway. After I dismissed them as faking it, rolled my eyes, and sent them back to class now. Parents are screaming, lawyers are circling, the media is attacking me, and everyone is acting like I personally caused it. I've been teaching for 12 years. Same district, same building for most of that. I teach middle school, sometimes early high school depending on staffing. It's the age where everything feels like the end of the world, and also nothing feels real at the same time. I'm known, at least I was known, as one of the safe teachers. The one kids come to when they don't want to go home yet. The one parents email at the end of the year to say, thank you for being patient with their kid when no one else was. I keep granola bars and juice boxes in my desk because some of my students don't eat breakfast. I buy notebooks and pencils with my own money because I'm tired of watching kids try to tear pages out of old binders. I run an after-school club that I don't get paid for. I remember birthdays. I let kids sit quietly in my room during lunch if the cafeteria is too loud for them. None of this makes me special. A lot of teachers do this. I'm saying it because right now it feels like my entire identity has been flattened into one moment. I love teaching. I'm also exhausted. We're understaffed. Our nurse is part-time and split between buildings. Admin has been on us all year about oversending kids out of class. There have been emails and staff meetings about liability, about students using the nurse as an avoidance tactic. We've been told, more than once, to try to manage things in the classroom when possible. Breathing exercises, water, letting them sit for a minute, documenting patterns. The day this happened was chaos from the start. I was covering another class during passing period because a teacher called out. One of my own students was already crying in the corner of the room because they'd had a fight with a friend and refused to go to their next class. The hallway was loud and packed, and I was trying to keep kids moving while also making sure no one was melting down. That's when the student came up to me. They looked pale. Not theatrical, not dramatic, just off. They said they felt weird and couldn't focus. They were shaking a little. This is a student who has a reputation, fairly or not, for anxiety, frequent visits to the counselor, frequent complaints of not feeling well before tests. I'm not proud of how much that context matters, but it does when you're making decisions in real time. I had them sit down. I asked them to breathe with me. I told them to take some water. I asked if they could make it to class and let their teacher know if they still felt bad. They said they thought so. I remember feeling irritated, not at them specifically, just at everything. I remember rolling my eyes after they walked away. I hate admitting that, but it's true. It wasn't malicious. It was burnout and pressure and thinking I was doing what I'd been told to do. Minutes later, there was screaming in the hallway. I heard a thud that didn't sound like anything else. Someone yelled for help. The building went into lockdown. I didn't see everything clearly, just flashes. The student on the floor, another teacher starting CPR, kids crying, paramedics pushing through the doors. I sat on the floor of my classroom with my students while everything happened and tried to keep my voice steady. After the dismissal, I got in my car and didn't turn it on for a long time. I cried until my face hurt. I texted a coworker that I thought I messed up. I've since found out the student's heart has stopped. I'm not trying to say I didn't make a mistake. I did, but I genuinely don't know if I'm a monster. Update 1. I wanted to come back and update. I read every comment on my last post even if I didn't respond. I don't have a clean emotional takeaway yet. I'm still very much inside it. The student is alive. That's the first thing I checked when I woke up. They're still in critical condition, but stable enough that doctors are cautiously optimistic. I don't know what that means long term, and I don't think anyone does yet. I think people assume that because they didn't die, the story should soften. It didn't. If anything, it hardened. The day after I posted, I sat at my kitchen table and wrote a letter to the student's family. Not an apology exactly, just something human. I wrote about how scared I was, how I wished I had walked them myself, how I was thinking about their child constantly. I folded it and put it in an envelope and then left it on the counter for 2 days. I never sent it. Admin had already told me not to contact anyone connected to the situation. I kept imagining the letter being used as evidence of guilt or spun into something else. It's still sitting in a drawer. Administration told me again that this was routine and that I needed to keep quiet for my own protection. They used calm language, procedural language. They kept saying things like this happens and the district has protocols. Within 48 hours, my name was out. Not officially, but it didn't matter. A parent posted in a local Facebook group naming me and saying I mocked their child while they were dying. That post spread into other groups. Screenshots made it to Twitter. People who have never stepped foot in my classroom decided they knew exactly who I was. I stopped checking after someone commented that I should never be allowed near children again. What made my stomach drop wasn't even that. It was finding out, through another teacher, that the student's parent had recorded a meeting with admin earlier this year. I didn't know this at the time, but apparently the student had fainted before, not at school, but it had been brought up. There were concerns, questions about whether something medical was going on. Admin knew. No one ever told me. There was nothing in the student's file that flagged this as anything more than anxiety. I keep replaying that too, wondering how differently I would have acted if I had known. The personal fallout has been strange and uneven. Some of my students found my number through the school directory and texted me saying they miss me and hope I'm okay. Those messages break me in a way I can't explain. Other kids are making videos calling me evil, stitching together rumors and half-true details. Seeing my name come out of mouths that used to ask me for help with homework feels unreal, like I slipped into someone else's life. My partner has been dragged into it too. People from their job recognized my name and made comments. Nothing threatening, just enough to make them feel exposed and angry on my behalf. I didn't realize how far this would reach beyond me until it did. 2 days ago, I was officially placed on administrative leave. They told me it was for my protection. They said it was paid and temporary. I nodded and said okay, and hung up the phone, and then sat on the floor for a long time. Being told not to come back to the place you've poured yourself into for over a decade hits differently than I expected. It felt like being quietly erased. What's been hardest is the absence. No one from admin has checked in since that call. No one from the district has offered legal guidance. I reached out to my union rep and the response was polite but distant. Very careful. Lots of talk about investigations and waiting and process. Nothing that made me feel like a person who was falling apart, more like a liability that needed to be managed. I'm still thinking about the student constantly. I still feel sick when I remember my eye roll. I still wish I could rewind 10 minutes and do one thing differently. That hasn't gone away. What has changed is the growing realization that I'm being positioned as the end of the story instead of part of it. The emails about reducing nurse visits, the known fainting incident, the staffing issues, all of that is being swallowed up by my name and my face. I've always been the kind of person who assumes good intent. I've defended admin in the past when other teachers complained. I told myself they were under pressure too. I believed that if I did my job with care, the system would back me when things went wrong. Sitting here now, refreshing news pages and waiting for another shoe to drop, that belief feels painfully naive. I don't know if I'll ever be allowed back into a classroom. I don't know how much of my life is about to be defined by this moment. What I do know is that the silence from the people who told me to trust them is louder than anything being said online. Update 2. I've been sitting with whether to post this because it feels like another shift happened and I don't know yet what it means long term. After my last update, a few people messaged me privately telling me to get a lawyer. I resisted that at first, not because I didn't think it might be necessary, but because some part of me still believed the district would eventually step in and say this got out of hand, that someone would correct the record, that if I stayed calm and cooperative, the truth would surface on its own. I can see now how naive that was. I hired a lawyer last week. It wasn't dramatic. I sat in my car outside their office for 10 minutes before going in, staring at the steering wheel, feeling like I was betraying a version of myself that still wanted to believe in systems and good faith. The meeting itself was quiet and methodical. They asked for emails, policies, and timelines, things I didn't even realize I had memorized until I started talking. What cracked everything open was what they found once they started requesting records, nurse logs that showed the student had been in multiple times over the year for dizziness and feeling faint. Not daily, not constant, but enough that it formed a pattern. Emails from admin to staff about reducing nurse referrals, phrased as reminders about classroom management and instructional time. Nothing that explicitly said, don't send kids, but enough that the message was clear if you were the one being evaluated. Then other teachers started reaching out to me, not publicly, not in ways they could be quoted, just quiet messages saying they'd been in similar situations, kids saying they felt off, admin telling them to handle it in class. One teacher told me about a student who nearly passed out during a test and was told to finish and then go. Another said they'd been reprimanded for sending too many kids out in a single week. Reading those messages made something in my chest tighten, not because it made me feel better, but because it confirmed this wasn't just my bad judgment in a vacuum. Around the same time, the media attention ramped up. a local news station ran a segment that included my photo from the school website, a yearbook photo, cropped and zoomed in, my face frozen in a neutral smile. The headline implied negligence without saying it outright. Watching my name scroll across the bottom of the screen felt surreal. This wasn't a person anymore. It was a story shape people could pour their anger into. The hardest part of that has been realizing how quickly a reputation can be rewritten. I've had parents I've worked with for years go quiet. People who used to wave at me in the grocery store look away. It's like my past has been edited without my consent. The version of me that stayed late, that sat on the floor with kids who were crying, that advocated for services, that version doesn't exist in this narrative. With my lawyer's guidance, I wrote a statement. It took days, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I wanted it to be careful, human. I expressed regret for my decision in that moment. I acknowledged that I wish I had acted differently. I also said that the situation was part of a larger system and that placing the entire weight of it on one teacher was not accurate. It wasn't defensive. It wasn't emotional. It was honest. The district responded with their own statement shortly after. It was vague, full of phrases about taking concerns seriously and reviewing protocols. It also emphasized that a teacher had made an error in judgment. My name wasn't mentioned, but it didn't need to be. The implication was clear. It was enough to satisfy the public appetite for accountability without actually addressing anything structural. That was the moment something in me shifted. I realized that my willingness to be compassionate, to hold space for everyone else's pain, was being used to simplify the story. My regret was being treated as an admission. My silence was being interpreted as agreement. I had been careful not to speak because I didn't want to cause more harm. Meanwhile, harm was being done anyway, just more selectively. I still think about the student every day. I still hope they recover fully. I don't want that to be lost in any of this. But I'm starting to understand that caring doesn't mean absorbing blame that isn't solely mine. It doesn't mean letting an institution protect itself by offering me up as a symbol. I've always told my students that standing up for yourself doesn't make you unkind, that you can be empathetic and still have boundaries. I didn't realize how hard it would be to follow my own advice when it mattered most. I don't know where this goes from here. I know the situation is bigger now, legally and publicly, than I wanted it to be. Update 3. Things crossed a line, and I found out through my lawyer, not the district, that they settled with the family. There was no heads up, no check-in. No conversation about what that settlement would say or imply. I wasn't asked for input or context or even informed ahead of time. It was just done, signed, finalized, and buried in the language was the suggestion that a teacher's misconduct played a role. That teacher being me. It's hard to explain how destabilizing that was. Not because I didn't already know the district was distancing itself from me, but because this made it permanent. Settlements don't live in the abstract. They get referenced, they get cited, they become the shorthand version of events. And now, on paper, the version of me that exists is someone whose error rose to the level of legal resolution. I'm still technically on leave, but job prospects evaporated overnight. Interviews that were scheduled quietly disappeared. One principal I'd worked with years ago stopped responding after asking what had happened off the record. My pension contributions were frozen pending the outcome of the district's internal review, which has no timeline and no transparency. It's like being suspended in amber while everything else keeps moving. The union declined arbitration. That email was short and polite and final. They cited cost, likelihood of success, broader strategy. I read it 3 times and felt something in me go very still. I had paid into that union for over a decade. I had volunteered at events, walked picket lines, defended it to skeptical colleagues, and when it came down to it, it was too messy to be worth the effort. That was the moment the guilt loosened its grip. I don't mean I stopped caring about what happened. I don't mean I stopped replaying that day in my head, but the constant need to absorb everyone else's outrage, to make myself smaller so the situation could feel contained, that fell away. What replaced it wasn't rage exactly, clarity. I realized that the district had made a calculation. A quiet one, but a decisive one. One teacher was easier to sacrifice than an entire system. One name was easier to attach than a decade of understaffing, policy pressure, and paper-thin support. I had become a buffer, a story people could point to so they didn't have to look further. So I sued, wrongful termination, even though they haven't used that phrase yet. Defamation, because letting a settlement imply misconduct while leaking my identity to parents and media isn't neutral. Emotional distress, because I don't know what else to call waking up every night at 3 with my heart racing and my phone buzzing with notifications from strangers who think they know me. My lawyer advised me to let documentation speak instead of me. Emails, nurse logs, staff memos, performance reviews that praised my judgment and care right up until the moment it became inconvenient. Other teachers agreed to testify, some reluctantly, some with visible relief. They described the same pressures, the same warnings, the same sense that you were on your own if something went wrong. Once the filing became public, the tone shifted. Not everywhere, not all at once, but enough that I noticed. Reporters started asking different questions. Less about my character and more about district policy. Parents started demanding resignations that weren't mine. Admin statements got more defensive, less confident. People who hadn't returned my calls suddenly wanted to clarify timelines. I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired in a new way, like someone who finally put down a weight they'd been carrying because they were told it was theirs. I don't know how this will end. I know litigation is slow and unglamorous and often unsatisfying. I know some people will never change their minds about me. I've made peace with that. What I couldn't make peace with was being erased quietly while everyone else moved on cleaner than they deserved to be. I keep thinking about the kids I taught over the years, the ones who trusted me, the ones who came back to visit, the ones who told me school felt safer in my room. I don't want them to grow up believing that being kind means being expendable, or that doing your best in a broken system means you deserve to be destroyed by it. Final update. The lawsuit ended a few weeks ago. The district settled with me. There's an NDA, so I can't get into specifics or timelines, and I can't say certain things even though I wish I could. What I can say is that the payout was significant enough that I don't have to panic about money anymore. My pension issues were resolved quietly as part of it. Nothing dramatic, nothing public-facing, no apology, no acknowledgement that what they did to me was wrong. That part still stings more than I expected. People assume that a settlement feels like winning. It doesn't. It feels like the moment when everyone agrees to stop talking, even though the damage is already done. The district got to close the book without admitting fault. I got to close the book knowing the story that exists publicly will always be incomplete. A few months after everything was finalized, the superintendent resigned. It wasn't framed as being connected to my case. It never is. But my parents noticed. Teachers noticed. The timing wasn't subtle. There were also 2 admin transfers that happened quietly at the end of the school year. No announcements, no explanations, just names disappearing from email signatures. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt tired. The student recovered. I know that because my lawyer told me, not because the family ever reached out. I never expected them to. I don't blame them for not wanting anything to do with me, even now. Still, I used to imagine that if the student was okay, I'd feel lighter, that some invisible pressure would lift. It didn't work like that. There was no closure, no relief scene, just the slow realization that I didn't need it anymore. I resigned from teaching shortly after the settlement. Technically, I could have tried to go back. My license wasn't revoked. Nothing formal was stopping me, but I knew I couldn't walk into a classroom again without carrying all of this with me. Not just what happened in the hallway, but what came after. The way a system I trusted turned me into a liability overnight. The way my name became disposable the second it was useful. I miss the kids. I miss the small stuff more than I thought I would. Bulletin boards, inside jokes, the quiet relief on a student's face when they realize you're not mad at them. But I don't miss the constant pressure to absorb everything without ever being protected myself. I work in a different space now. Advocacy, training, compliance. I help districts review policies around medical response, staffing, documentation. I teach administrators how not to panic and scapegoat when something goes wrong. It's strange sometimes, being on the other side of the table. Sometimes I still think about that day. Not every day anymore, but often enough. I replay the moment I made the call I can't take back. I don't pretend it was nothing. I don't minimize it. I live with it. But I no longer let it define the sum of who I am. What defined me, in the end, was how quickly I was abandoned once I became inconvenient. I've had former students reach out, some apologizing for things they said online when they were younger and caught up in it. Some are just saying they hope I'm okay. I don't hold any of that against them. They were kids watching adults model cruelty and panic and certainty where none existed. If there's anything I want people reading this to take away, it's not that teachers are perfect or that mistakes don't matter. It's that institutions will always protect themselves first. And if you don't protect yourself, no amount of past kindness will save you.